Right now, we're going to welcome our next live guest. We've got Joe Larusso with us, an attorney, and he's going to talk a little bit about that advocating for mental health in the industry. Joe, thank you for joining us. We're super excited to have you on the show, especially because this continues the conversation that we had on our very first episode about the importance of pilots feeling safe in their ability to deal with mental health.
Really, thank you guys so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So let's talk a little bit about it. You're definitely a fierce advocate for supporting pilot mental health in the industry, specifically when it comes to raising awareness for the FAA. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the work that you do and why you believe in it so passionately?
Sure. Yeah, I can start with the second half of that question. So I'm still a professional pilot. I fly half the time and I do attorneying half the time. And depending on the week, that sliding scale goes to one side or the other. Specifically with aviation law, I do certificate defense, and one of the few that does certificate defense with a focus on the medical side. I actually started my career, I don't know, those watching may be aware, the HIMSS program is the program for substance dependence and substance abuse for pilots. And I started my career putting pilots into that program and letting 135 and 91 drivers have access to what is normally a 121 program. And then as my career progressed, I realized that the HIMSS program has essentially lost the plot, and it stopped being about clinical medicine and it started being about money in pockets. So then I switched and started pulling pilots out of the HIMSS program. And from there, it's evolved beyond the HIMSS program to a wider and broader look at the FAA medical standards and realizing how absolutely out of touch they are with current clinical medicine. And how inadequate the regs are from the aeromedical side. So it is a constant bang your head up against the wall fight with the FAA, but it's one that's worthwhile and necessary.
So what's the latest developments that you've been seeing? There's been a lot of conversations around this. UND just hosted a summit on mental health in aviation. What's some of the things that the FAA is doing right now to try and combat this problem?
So honestly, nothing. And I know I'm going to get flack from the FAA, but that's the truth. They're doing a lot. Dr. Northrup is doing the Air Up There podcast, right, where she's talking about mental health. They're trying to do, awareness, and, you should be able to get health, and you should be able to get help if you have mental health concerns. But really, that doesn't mean anything. What needs to change are the regulations. The regulations concerning mental health haven't been updated since the early 80s. We're talking decades back. So, they can say as much as they want. The FAA can say, we're an advocate for mental health and we want people to seek treatment when they, if necessary. But until they actually start changing the regs through, rulemaking and notice and comment period, it's all a facade. It's honestly all a show.
So with that, there's obviously been, since those regulations were instituted in the late 80s, the last even just decade for mental health research across the United States, but the globe has just made leaps and bounds on the way that people see mental health from a stigmatized point of view and unstigmatized point of view, and then in that actual treatment aspect. Many people, if they have mental health issues, from small to wide, they can live very fulfilling lives, have very fulfilled careers, as long as they are taking the right steps and they acknowledge it. But oftentimes, if it's still in an industry that's stigmatized, it can be very hard to get help if you know, hey, admitting this is going to cost me my job, my livelihood, my hobbyist, Can you touch a little bit on what specific policies you think need to change to kind of encourage that, and maybe how you can get research, clinical research being done from the healthcare standpoint to actually be accepted and heard by an entity like the FAA?
Yeah, it's a great point that you made. I mean, we often fight the court of public opinion, and what I tell people, what I do is I try and humanize pilots, right? There's no reason that pilots can't be humans too, right? We grieve when we lose a loved one, right? COVID was hard for everybody. It was hard on the industry. It was hard on people's just kind of mental health, general mental health. And we're not talking about, Oftentimes we get the thought that when I say mental health, we're talking about schizophrenia and bipolar, and but I'm also just talking about anxiety and just situational depression, and honestly, being a human with human emotions, right? And you're exactly right. Those issues can be addressed. They can be addressed through counselors, through therapists, even through medication, through psychiatry. There's definitely a sliding scale to be able to handle those type of conditions. And right now, the regulations don't reflect the ability to do any of that, honestly. So from the FAA standpoint with the regulations, if you are grieving for the loss of a loved one and maybe you have situational or acute depression in response to that, you're disqualified. And you're as disqualified to fly as somebody with bipolar disorder. And you can't get you can't go see a counselor or therapist because that's reportable on question 19 of your 8500-8 on your medical application. You have to disclose that. And that opens a whole new world of a psychiatric panel that has to go through the federal air surgeon. And the federal air surgeon is backed up right now by 15 months for reviews. It definitely is a challenge. I think the biggest step, honestly, if they're looking for a policy change while they work on the rulemaking, the FAA utilizes, for most mental health concerns, the FAA will utilize HIMSS psychologists and HIMSS psychiatrists to evaluate airmen for mental health conditions. What we're finding, though, is the FAA will reverse their decisions. And that's the problem, is we have people that are disconnected in the Federal Air Surgeon's office that are looking at a report and making a clinical decision that is counter to a medical professional that has face-to-face seen the pilot, went through the medical records, and evaluated them appropriately. The fact that those are getting disregarded, those evaluations are getting disregarded is shocking.
So who else is preaching this message? Obviously, you're pretty outspoken on social media about this. Who else is leading the way and paving the way and in raising awareness to this issue?
So AOPA has been pretty strong about it, and I appreciate the fact that they've done that. But it's definitely one of those things that we do have to fight the court of public opinion, right? Whenever you talk about mental health, you talk about substance abuse, you talk about substance dependence that goes with that. No general person, if you stop somebody in Newark, right, and you ask them, hey, would you be concerned if your pilot had depression? Immediately, the general public is saying, no, I don't want that. So honestly, the industry is not as outspoken as it should be about it because no one wants to fight that, the court of public opinion. But AOPA is certainly one, and then there's a couple other aviation attorneys as well that are taking the charge. We got a small army, but we got something.
So if there is a pilot listening or watching, what do they need to do? Do they need to engage with a lawyer first before they take action, or what do they need to do next step if they're struggling with something like this?
So the first thing that I would tell any pilot that's struggling is have the courage to go and get help, right? So often pilots will not do that, and they'll turn to whatever the FAA accepts, right, which is alcohol use, right? So they're all self-medicating. It's funny, all the substance-dependent pilots that I represent, in my entire time doing this for the better part of a decade, I've never had a pilot relapse. It's really uncommon for what is normally an alcoholic, right? And that's because most of these pilots are not alcoholics. They're dealing with just life stressors and emotional issues, and they're choosing to self-medicate rather than seeing a counselor, a therapist, a psychiatrist. So the big advice is go see somebody, right? You're a priority. And I know that's hard for pilots because this is our identity. This is who we are. This is our entire lives, our passion. But go see somebody and then go see an aviation attorney because we can do a lot more proactively than we can reactively. It's very easy for the FAA to stay with their heels in the sand if they've already said no once.
Joe, thank you so much for coming on the show today. This is so important, I think, to continue the conversation about if people want to reach out to you specifically, can they do that? And if so, where can they go?
Absolutely. So I'm the director of aviation law at Ramos Law. We're headquartered in Denver, but we operate nationwide. So ramoslaw.com. give them a call. I will talk to any pilot. So don't worry about, everybody always wonders what it's going to cost to talk to an aviation attorney. I'm first and foremost a pilot. So if there are pilots out there that need help and just have some general questions, just call me. I'm more than happy to chat.
All right, Joe, thank you so much again. We appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Y'all have a great day.
You as well.